So anyway, that's the story of just one family in the thousands and thousands of families in Iraq who had now experienced this detainee problem. We decided as a team that we would take 100 cases and we would try to understand what is happening in the system, how they were treated, where they were, what the families were informed, if they ever were informed, and so forth. And so we compiled as exhaustive a report as we could. And we made kind of a tactical decision on that report because we discovered fairly early on that there was a fairly serious pattern of abusive behavior which we could hint at, but some of the stuff that came out in the Abu Gharib scandal report in the media, we also were aware of. And the way an Iraqi speaks of this is not in the first person. He never says, "This happened to me," because it is just too shameful. They would simply say, "I know a person who was forced to take his clothes off and there was various activities directed at his body," you know, and they would, I mean, obvious sexual overtones. So this was also going on, but we didn't include it in our report because we knew nobody would believe us, you see. And you're in peace work, you want to get something done, you also want to tell the truth, and so you're stuck with kind of this sort of dilemma, and this is not an unusual dilemma. So we posted this report on the internet and did a press conference, a series of press conferences actually, and news groups from around the world came and said, "We want to work on this story, and we want to do a story for Japan or Germany or some other place, but never the American outlets." And however, when I went home in January, I was contacted by 4 of the 5 major news agencies in January and February, and the question always was, "Do you have pictures?" And my response always was, we were not invited into the interrogation chambers. So we had the profile, but we didn't have the pictures. In the process of that unfolding period, we kept in touch with the military, and we provided our report and so forth, and I think it was kicked upstairs. In that, you know, you learn to know the higher officers, but you also learn to know the non-commissioned, the lower level folks. And they're the ones that make the military work, right? And they're also the ones sometimes who have kind of moral judgment. And in that process, at one point, a little flash card came to us for our computer, and it was a database, as much as they could get, for our work, which was somewhat of a listing of a lot of the political prisoners. It was a confidential thing. And occasionally this was updated, and this allowed us, when necessary and when we could, to inform families that, as far as we know, your son, your husband, and occasionally your daughter is in such and such a place. And that's actually, that's a big thing, to be able to say to the family, yes, we think your son or your daughter or your husband exists. Because when someone has disappeared for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, I mean, it's just awful, you know, it's awful. And during that period, we also spent some time going to mosques, leading mosques in Baghdad and elsewhere, just to make relationships and connections, and that worked out really well. And it's much easier to be a Christian peacemaker team than to be a post-Christian peacemaker team or whatever else, because then it's clear who you are, and the Quran teaches respect for Christians and for Jesus and for Mary and so forth. That's another whole discussion. But we developed a whole set of relationships in the Muslim community. And that was enormously important later on when, for CPTers were taken hostage, and we got really the most important support from the Muslim community and the second most important support from the Christian community around the world for the release of 3 out of 4 of those people. So, but the end of this story was the explosion around Abu Gharib, which we were, I mean, getting that material together and working with it and so forth. I will take a little bit of credit that we contributed to the culture that allowed the military to, low-level military, to reveal their pictures and the media to be open, and this whole process of getting the story of the detainees. Now it's not over, folks. When the U.S. turned over or made this agreement for the U.S. presence in Iraq that meant some changes, December 31, one of the things that was turned over was more than 20,000 detainees still down at Qasr and other places to the Iraqi government. And the Iraqi activists are absolutely outraged about this, because the nature of the treatment of detainees in Iraq under the present situation is approximately what it was under Saddam Hussein. So that's what we've gained in 7 years. That's what 7 years has gotten us. So the work goes on, and this is of course very discouraging, you know. So it means that that our work requires decades and centuries, and but that's sort of just one piece of the work of CPT. And I wanted to tell you 1 or 2 more stories, but we need to have a discussion here.